There are mornings when you wake and feel it immediately, a strange weight pressing against your chest. Not exhaustion, not sadness exactly, something deeper, something that makes you look at the world around you and feel utterly alone, even when surrounded by people. You see things others don't see. You notice the contradictions, the lies people tell themselves, the masks they wear so comfortably it's as if the masks have become their faces. And the worst part, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to the innocence of not knowing. You've crossed a threshold, and now you stand on the other side, watching everyone else live in a world that feels increasingly unreal to you. You try to speak about what you see, and people look at you with confusion, irritation, even fear. They tell you you're overthinking, that you're too negative, that you should just relax and enjoy life like everyone else. But you can't, because once you've seen through the illusions that hold society together, once you've glimpsed the raw truth beneath the comfortable lies, there's no comfortable place left for you in the world that everyone else inhabits. You find yourself withdrawing, not because you want to be alone, but because being around others has become exhausting. Every conversation feels like a performance. Every social gathering feels like a theater where everyone knows their lines except you. You've forgotten how to pretend, or perhaps you've simply lost the ability to believe in the pretense. And so, you pay a price. The price of seeing, the price of consciousness, the price of refusing to participate in the collective delusion. And you wonder, as you lie awake at night, whether this awareness is a gift or a curse, whether you're blessed or broken, whether you're going mad or finally becoming sane in an insane world. You are not broken. Let me say this clearly, because you need to hear it. What you're experiencing is not a failure of your mind or your spirit. You haven't become cynical or jaded or mentally unwell. What's happened is that you've developed a kind of vision that most people never acquire. And that vision comes with a cost that nobody warned you about. Dostoevsky understood this better than almost any writer who ever lived. He spent his entire life exploring the psychology of those who see too much, who understand too deeply, who cannot find peace in the comfortable illusions that sustain ordinary life. In his characters, in his own tortured existence, he documented what happens to a human being who refuses to look away from truth. You are living what his characters lived. The underground man who sees through every social convention and finds himself paralyzed by consciousness. Raskolnikov, who understands something about human nature that others refuse to acknowledge and is destroyed by that knowledge. Even Karamazov, who asks questions that God himself cannot answer and goes mad from the silence. These aren't just literary characters. They're portraits of a particular kind of suffering that comes from seeing what others deny. And if you recognize yourself in these figures, if you feel that same isolation, that same burden of consciousness, then you're experiencing something that Dostoevsky would have understood intimately. The world tells you that you're the problem, that you need to adjust, to adapt, to think more positively, to stop being so serious. But Dostoevsky would tell you something different. He would tell you that your suffering is evidence that you're still human in a world that's increasingly choosing comfortable numbness over painful truth. What you call your burden, Dostoevsky would call your awakening. What you experience as isolation, he would recognize as integrity. What feels like a curse, he understood as the beginning of genuine humanity. You see, most people live in what Dostoevsky called the Crystal Palace, a structure of comfortable lies and agreed upon fictions that make social life possible. They accept the stories society tells about success, happiness, morality, progress. They follow the script without questioning whether the script makes sense. They pursue goals that others have defined for them. They feel emotions they're supposed to feel. They want what they're supposed to want. And this gives them a kind of peace, the peace of unconsciousness, the comfort of belonging, the security of never having to think too deeply or question too hard. But you've stepped outside the Crystal Palace. You've seen that it's built on foundations of sand and held together by collective agreement to ignore the cracks. You've noticed that the emperor has no clothes, and once you've seen his nakedness, you can't unsee it, no matter how much everyone else insists on admiring his magnificent robes. This is what Dostoevsky meant when he wrote about the consciousness that separates certain people from the crowd. It's not that you're smarter or better, it's that you've become unable to participate in the necessary illusions. You see the suffering behind the smiles. You notice the desperation beneath the confidence. You feel the emptiness inside the success. You recognize the fear driving the certainty, and this seeing isolates you because you're surrounded by people who've made an unconscious agreement not to see these things. They've chosen the comfort of the Crystal Palace over the harsh light of truth. And when you refuse to join them in that choice, when you insist on speaking about what you see, you become dangerous to them, not because you're attacking them, but because your very existence reminds them of what they're avoiding. Dostoevsky observed throughout his work that there are different types of seeing, different ways that consciousness awakens, and different prices each type pays. The first type is what he portrayed in his Underground Man. These are the ones who see the mechanical nature of human behavior, the predictable patterns, the way people are driven by vanity and self-deception without realizing it. They see how society runs on hypocrisy, how moral principles are just masks for self-interest, how everything people claim to believe contradicts how they actually behave. This seeing makes them cynical, bitter, unable to participate in normal social life because they can't stop analyzing everyone's motivations, including their own. They become paralyzed by consciousness, trapped in endless self-examination, unable to act because every action seems contaminated by the same self-deception they see in others. The second type is embodied in characters like Raskolnikov. These are the ones who see the arbitrary nature of moral rules, the way society's laws and values are just human constructions without ultimate foundation. They recognize that if there's no God, no absolute truth, then everything is permitted. This seeing leads them to test boundaries, to challenge conventional morality, to ask whether exceptional individuals might be justified in transgressing ordinary rules for extraordinary purposes. They pay the price through guilt, through the discovery that even if moral rules are arbitrary, the human conscience is not. They learn that you can intellectually reject morality, but you cannot escape the psychological consequences of acting against it. The third type appears in Ivan Karamazov and similar figures. These are the ones who see the problem of suffering, the question of why an allegedly loving God would create a world filled with innocent pain. They see the cruelty built into existence itself, the way children suffer, the way good people are destroyed while evil prospers, the way the universe seems fundamentally indifferent to human well being. This seeing leads them into intellectual rebellion against God, against the universe, against the very structure of reality. They pay the price through a kind of spiritual torment, unable to believe, but also unable to stop caring about the questions that belief tries to answer. But Dostoevsky identified a fourth type of seeing, and this is perhaps the most important. These are the ones who see all of the above, all the hypocrisy and arbitrariness and suffering, but who also see something deeper still. They see that beneath the masks people wear, there's a genuine human soul struggling towards something real. They see that even though moral rules are human constructions, there's something sacred about human conscience. They see that suffering is terrible and perhaps inexplicable, but that it can also be the pathway to transformation. These are the ones who've gone through cynicism and come out the other side, who've faced the abyss of meaninglessness and found something worth believing in anyway, who've accepted that truth is painful, but lies are worse. You might be any of these types, or you might be moving between them, but if you're paying the price of seeing what others deny, you're somewhere on this spectrum of consciousness that Dostoevsky spent his life exploring. And here's what he understood that few others have. The price you're paying isn't pointless. The isolation isn't accidental. The suffering isn't a mistake. It's the process by which a human being is forged into something capable of real compassion, real integrity, real depth. When you see what others deny, several things begin to happen inside you, and each one feels like a small death. First, you lose the ability to engage in normal conversation. Small talk becomes unbearable because you can see the anxiety it's covering, the loneliness it's masking, the desperate attempt to avoid any moment of genuine human connection. People talk about the weather, about their weekend plans, about surface details of their lives, and you can feel the weight of everything they're not saying, the real fears, the real longings, the real questions about whether their life means anything. You want to cut through all of it and say, let's talk about what's actually happening here. Let's acknowledge that we're all afraid and lonely and pretending not to be. But you can't, because that would violate the unspoken rules of social interaction. So you participate in the shallow exchanges while feeling increasingly like a fraud, someone play acting at being normal while screaming internally. Second, you begin to see relationships differently. You notice how most human connections are based on unspoken contracts and mutual self-deception. Two people agree to reinforce each other's self-image, to validate each other's choices, to never question each other's fundamental stories about who they are. And as long as both parties maintain the illusion, the relationship feels stable. But you can't maintain your part of the illusion anymore. You see through your own self-deceptions, which means you can't help seeing through others. You notice when your partner is lying to themselves about what makes them happy. You see when your friends are following paths they don't actually want because they're too afraid to admit it. And the moment you gently point this out, the moment you suggest that maybe they're not being honest with themselves, the relationship becomes threatened. Because what people want from relationships isn't truth, it's confirmation. They want someone who will agree with the story they're telling themselves. And you can't be that person anymore. Third, you develop a strange relationship with success and achievement. You see people chasing promotions, accumulating possessions, building impressive resumes, seeking recognition and status. And you can see so clearly that they're running on a treadmill, pursuing goals that won't actually make them happy, trying to fill an inner emptiness with external accomplishments. You've lost the ability to believe in these pursuits yourself. You can't get excited about a raise because you know it won't solve the real problems. You can't care about status because you see how arbitrary and meaningless it all is. This makes you appear unmotivated to others, like you've given up or lost your drive. But really, you've just lost your ability to believe in false solutions. Fourth, and perhaps most painfully, you begin to feel responsible for things you cannot fix. When you see through the masks, when you notice the suffering that everyone is trying to hide, you feel it. You carry other people's pain, even when they don't acknowledge it themselves. You walk through the world feeling the weight of collective denial, collective fear, collective desperation, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't save people who don't want to be saved. You can't wake people who are determined to stay asleep. You can't force others to see what you see. So, you carry this awareness alone, feeling like you're the only person at a party who can see that the building is on fire while everyone else keeps dancing. Dostoevsky would tell you that this is the crucible. This is where the real transformation happens, or where people break. He saw that consciousness of this kind creates a fork in the road. One path leads to what he called the underground, to cynicism and isolation and eventual spiritual death. You become so disgusted by human self-deception that you withdraw completely. You decide that since everyone is pretending, since nothing is real, since truth is unbearable and lies are all people want, then you might as well just watch from a distance with contempt. This is the path of the underground man, and it leads to a kind of living death, a state where you're technically alive, but completely disconnected from anything that gives life meaning. The other path is harder, but it's the only one that leads anywhere worth going. It's the path of what Dostoevsky called redemptive suffering. You accept the price of seeing. You acknowledge that yes, you're isolated. Yes, you're burdened with awareness that others don't share. Yes, you can't go back to comfortable unconsciousness. But instead of turning this into bitterness, you transform it into compassion. You realize that the very things you see through, the masks and pretenses and self-deceptions, these are how people are trying to survive. They're not stupid or bad. They're afraid. They're suffering. They're doing the best they can with the tools they have. And your ability to see through their defenses isn't a reason to judge them. It's a reason to understand them more deeply. This is the turn that Dostoevsky kept returning to in his work. The moment when seeing through everything doesn't lead to nihilism, but to a deeper form of love. When you understand that everyone is struggling, everyone is afraid, everyone is putting on a brave face while feeling lost inside. And this understanding, instead of making you superior or contemptuous, makes you tender. It makes you gentle. It makes you patient with human weakness, because you see that weakness is universal. You stop judging people for their illusions, because you recognize that your own consciousness came at such a high price that you wouldn't wish it on anyone. You've paid to see what others don't see, and part of that payment is understanding why people avoid seeing it. But how do you actually walk this path? How do you transform the burden of seeing into something redemptive rather than just being crushed by it? Dostoevsky didn't offer easy answers, but he pointed toward certain practices, certain ways of being that might help. First, you must learn to be alone without becoming isolated. There's a difference. Isolation is closing yourself off from humanity out of disgust or despair. Solitude is spending time with yourself, with your thoughts, with the truth you've discovered, without running from it or trying to numb it. You need time away from the theater of social performance to remember what's real, to reconnect with your own actual thoughts and feelings rather than the ones you're supposed to have. This solitude isn't escape, it's returning to yourself. It's the practice of honesty that makes genuine connection possible when you do engage with others. Second, you must find the few. Not everyone is asleep. Not everyone is locked in the crystal palace. There are others who've paid the price of seeing, who know what you know, who can meet you in that place of difficult truth. These connections are rare, but they're essential. When you find someone who doesn't need you to pretend, who isn't threatened by honesty, who can acknowledge the pain of existence without trying to immediately fix or deny it, hold on to that connection. These are your true companions, the ones who prove that genuine human relationship is possible even after you've seen through the illusions. Third, you must create something with your seeing. Dostoevsky wrote, he transformed his painful awareness into literature that spoke truth about the human condition. You might write, paint, make music, or simply speak honestly when the moment allows it. The point is to give form to what you see, to make it something that might help others who are struggling with the same awareness. Your consciousness isn't just for you. It's something that wants to be expressed, to be shared, to be made useful in the world. When you create from that place of seeing, you transform your burden into a gift. Fourth, and most difficult, you must practice compassion for those who don't see. This doesn't mean pretending you don't see what you see. It doesn't mean going back to living in the crystal palace. It means recognizing that unconsciousness has its own logic, its own necessity. People aren't choosing blindness because they're weak or stupid. They're choosing it because consciousness is genuinely painful, and not everyone has the resources to bear that pain. Your judgment of their blindness, your contempt for their illusions, this only increases your isolation and their defensiveness. But your compassion, your recognition that they're doing the best they can, this opens a small space for genuine connection. Not the connection of mutual illusion, but the connection of one human being acknowledging the suffering of another. The truth that Dostoevsky kept circling in all his work is that the price of seeing is paid in order to develop the capacity for real love. Not the sentimental, romanticized version of love that culture sells you, but the hard, honest, clear-eyed recognition of human beings in all their confusion and suffering and desperate attempts to find meaning. When you see through the masks, you have two choices. You can use that seeing to distance yourself, to feel superior, to justify your isolation by telling yourself you're simply more conscious than the sleeping masses. Or you can use that seeing to understand more deeply, to love more completely, to be present with others in their actual reality rather than the fantasy they're performing. The first choice leads to the underground, to bitterness and emptiness. The second choice leads to what Dostoevsky called redemption, not in any religious sense necessarily, but in the sense of transforming suffering into meaning, isolation into solitude, burden into purpose. You're paying the price for seeing what everyone denies. That price is real. The isolation is real. The exhaustion is real. The sense that you're living in a different world from everyone around you, that's real too. But what Dostoevsky understood is that this price purchases something. It purchases the possibility of genuine humanity, the possibility of connection based on truth rather than mutual deception, the possibility of love that sees clearly and chooses to love anyway. You haven't been cursed with consciousness. You've been initiated into something that most people never experience. And yes, it hurts. Yes, it's lonely. Yes, you can never go back to the comfortable sleep of unconsciousness. But moving forward, into deeper truth, into harder honesty, into the capacity to be present with reality as it actually is. This is the path toward becoming fully human. This is what Dostoevsky spent his entire life trying to show us. You are not too aware. You are not too sensitive. You are not damaged for seeing what others miss. You've simply arrived at a place in your development where the old comforts no longer work, where the collective illusions no longer satisfy, where you need something more real, even if more real means more difficult. And this place is not an end. It's a beginning. The beginning of a life lived with eyes open, with heart exposed, with consciousness intact. The price you're paying is the price of becoming who you actually are rather than who you were told to be. And that price, as painful as it is the best investment you'll ever make in your own humanity. So when you feel that isolation, when you feel that weight of seeing what others deny, remember Dostoevsky. Remember his characters who struggled with the same burden. Remember that you're not alone in this experience, even though it feels desperately lonely. Remember that what you're going through has a purpose, has a meaning, has a destination. You're being forged into something that this world desperately needs. Someone who can see clearly and still choose compassion. Someone who can acknowledge the darkness and still search for light. Someone who can pay the price of truth and still believe that truth is worth its cost. If this resonates with you, if you've felt this price, tell me in the comments which type of seeing you recognize in yourself. Your words might help someone else who feels completely alone in their awareness to know they're not the only one paying this price. And if you want to keep exploring these difficult truths, these uncomfortable realities that most people avoid, subscribe for more reflections that take consciousness seriously. You haven't been broken by seeing. You're being transformed by it. And that transformation, as painful as it is making you into something this world desperately needs. Someone who refuses to live asleep. Someone who pays the price of truth. Someone who proves that consciousness, for all its pain, is still worth choosing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for refusing to look away from what you see.